On a freezing Valentine's morning, in a quiet Swiss town, a perfect family vanished without a trace. Breakfast still on the table, blood on the floor, and no footprints in the snow. But what investigators discovered weeks later would make an entire nation weep. And reveal a secret so dangerous, it cost 3 lives and nearly a fourth. In the quiet mountain town of Rosenfeld, Switzerland, life moved slowly and peacefully. Snow-covered peaks surrounded the town like tall white walls, protecting it from the noise of the outside world. Wooden chalets lined the narrow roads, each with smoking chimneys and warm, glowing windows in the evenings. Among these homes stood the Schauer family chalet, larger than most, built from polished pine wood with wide windows that looked over a frozen blue lake. People often stopped to admire it. In summer, flowers filled the balcony. In winter, golden lights wrapped around the roof, making it look like something from a postcard. To everyone in Rosenfeld, the Schauer family looked perfect. Markus Schauer, the father, was one of the most respected men in town. He was a successful architect who designed modern homes across Switzerland. His work had been featured in magazines, and wealthy clients trusted him with their biggest projects. Markus always dressed neatly. Clean coats, polished shoes, and a calm smile that rarely faded. He spoke politely and shook hands firmly. But despite his friendly behavior, some people noticed he kept his personal life private. He rarely stayed long in conversations and often checked his phone during gatherings. Still, no one questioned him. Success often brought distance, and Markus was seen as a hardworking man providing for his family. His wife, Alina Schauer, was the heart of the household. Alina worked part-time at the town library, where children loved her gentle voice and warm smile. She helped them find books, listened to their stories, and sometimes stayed late to decorate reading corners with colorful drawings. She had soft brown hair, kind eyes, and a calm presence that made people feel safe around her. Parents trusted her with their children, and neighbors often described her as the kindest woman in Rosenfeld. But sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her smile would fade quickly, replaced by a look of deep worry. The Schauer children were equally admired. Luca, the eldest, was 12 years old. He was quiet but intelligent, often seen carrying a sketchbook wherever he went. Like his father, he loved drawing buildings, tall towers, glass houses, and long bridges. His teachers believed he had great talent and encouraged him to keep practicing. Sophie, only 8 years old, was the opposite of her brother. She was cheerful, playful, and full of laughter. She loved painting animals, rabbits, birds, and deer. And she always carried her favorite stuffed rabbit named Milo. Whenever the family walked together through town, people smiled. They looked like happiness itself. But behind the chalet's thick wooden walls, not everything was peaceful. Neighbors had begun noticing strange things. Late at night, when the town grew silent and streetlights flickered against falling snow, loud voices sometimes echoed from inside the Schauer home. At first, people ignored it. Families argued sometimes, that was normal. But over time, the arguments grew louder. One winter night, Mrs. Keller, who lived next door, woke suddenly to a loud crashing sound. It sounded like glass breaking. She sat up in bed, her heart racing. Moments later, she heard shouting. Markus's deep voice and Elena's trembling one. The words were unclear, but the anger was impossible to miss. Then everything went silent. Too silent. The next morning, Mrs. Keller saw Alana walking outside, brushing snow from the front steps. Elena smiled politely, just as she always did. But Mrs. Keller noticed something unsettling. Elena's hands were shaking badly. Everything all right? Mrs. Keller asked gently. Elena paused for a moment before answering. Yes, just dropped a glass last night, she said softly. Her smile returned, but it looked forced. Mrs. Keller nodded, but the uneasy feeling stayed with her for days. Still, like many in small towns, she chose not to ask more questions. It was easier to believe everything was fine. Then came February 14th, a day no one in Rosenfeld would ever forget. That morning, Fresh snow covered the town like a thick white blanket. Children prepared Valentine's cards at school, and shop windows displayed red hearts and chocolates. At Rosenfeld Elementary School, Luca's teacher, Mr. Baumann, began the morning attendance. "Luca Schauer," he called. No answer. Mr. Baumann frowned. Luca was never late. In fact, he usually arrived early. He checked the clock again, expecting Luca to rush through the door any second. But the door stayed closed. After 10 minutes, Mr. Baumann picked up the phone and called Elena's number. It rang and rang. No answer. He tried Marcus next. Still nothing. By noon, worry began to grow. Luca had missed an entire morning, something he had never done before. The school office contacted local police. 2 officers were assigned to check the Schauer home. As their police vehicle slowly climbed the snowy road toward the chalet, something felt strange. Smoke drifted gently from the chimney. That meant someone had been home recently. Everything looked normal from the outside. Too normal. The officers stepped out of the car, boots crunching against frozen snow. Cold air filled their lungs as they approached the wooden front door. One officer knocked loudly. No answer. He knocked again. Still silence. They exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, after repeated attempts, they forced the door open. The moment they stepped inside, a strange feeling settled over them. The house was quiet. Unnaturally quiet. Breakfast was still set on the dining table. 4 plates neatly arranged. Cups of coffee sat untouched, now cold. One chair lay tipped over on its side. And in the air, there was a faint metallic smell. One officer slowly walked toward the living room. His eyes scanned the polished wooden floor. Then he froze. Near the fireplace, a dark stain spread across the floorboards. Blood, fresh enough to still shine under the morning light. But there was no sign of the Schauer family. No voices. No movement. No explanation. Only silence. And in that silence, the perfect image of the Schauer family began to crack, revealing the beginning of a mystery that would soon make all of Switzerland weep. News spread through Rosenfeld faster than anyone expected. Within an hour of the police discovering blood inside the Schauer chalet, flashing blue lights filled the quiet street. Officers blocked the road, and yellow tape stretched across the driveway. Curious neighbors stood behind fences, whispering to each other in worried voices. Something terrible had happened. Everyone could feel it. Inside the chalet, investigators moved carefully from room to room, documenting every detail. The once warm and welcoming home now felt cold and unfamiliar. There were no signs of forced entry. The front door lock was intact. Windows were closed. Nothing looked broken from the outside. But inside, small signs told a different story. The breakfast table still held 4 plates. One plate had toast, now hard and dry. A cup of coffee sat untouched beside it, forming a thin layer of film on the surface. It looked as if the family had been about to eat, and then suddenly stopped. In the living room, the chair that had been knocked over lay beside the dark bloodstain. Detectives carefully measured it, took photographs, and collected samples. But strangely, there was not enough blood to suggest someone had died there. It looked more like someone had been injured, and then taken away. Upstairs, officers began searching the children's rooms. In Luca's bedroom, everything appeared tidy. His bed was neatly made, and his school bag rested against the wall. On his desk sat his favorite sketchbook. One detective opened it carefully. Page after page showed detailed drawings of buildings, tall towers, bridges, and houses with large windows. The work was impressive for a 12-year-old. But the last drawing stopped everyone. It showed the Schauer family standing outside their chalet. Marcus, Elena, Luca, and Sophie, smiling together. Behind them, drawn near the trees, was something strange. A tall, dark figure. It had no face. Just a shadowy shape hidden between the trees. The detective stared at it for a long moment. Was it imagination? Or had Luca seen something he never told anyone about? In Sophie's bedroom, the mood felt different. Softer, but equally unsettling. Her stuffed animals sat neatly along the bed. Her favorite rabbit, Milo, lay near the pillow. but the blanket was pulled halfway off the bed, hanging toward the floor. It looked as if she had climbed out of bed quickly, or had been taken. A small paintbrush lay on the floor beside a half-finished painting of a white rabbit standing in snow. Downstairs again, investigators discovered something new. Near the kitchen sink, faint streaks of blood led across the tile floor toward the back door. One officer carefully opened the door and stepped outside. Fresh snow covered the yard completely. Smooth, untouched, no footprints, no tire tracks, nothing. The officer looked around in disbelief. How could someone leave without leaving tracks? He whispered. The mystery deepened. Soon, search teams were organized. Volunteers from town gathered at the edge of the forest wearing thick coats and boots. Police dogs sniffed around the house before leading teams into the woods. Neighbors joined the effort, calling out the families' names into the cold mountain air. Lana! Luca! Sophie! But the forest answered only with silence. Hours turned into a full day. Then night fell. Searchlights cut through the darkness, reflecting off snow-covered trees. The temperature dropped quickly, making conditions dangerous. Still, no sign of the family. Late that evening, just as hope began to fade, a patrol officer walking near the frozen lake noticed something unusual. A small patch of red against the white snow. He moved closer. Half buried in ice was a red scarf. The officer carefully pulled it free. It was Alana's scarf, the one she wore often in winter. The discovery sent a wave of fear through the search teams. If Alana had been near the lake, what had happened there? Did she fall? Was she pushed? Or taken? The lake was immediately marked as a critical search area. Divers prepared equipment, though the freezing temperatures made their work dangerous. Meanwhile, investigators began examining Marcus Schauer's personal records. What they found shocked everyone. Marcus had large debts, far larger than anyone expected. Millions of Swiss francs, hidden loans, unpaid bills, and even more suspicious. Just 3 weeks before the disappearance, Marcus had taken out large life insurance policies. Not only for himself, but for Alina, for Luca, and for Sophie. The total value was enormous. Enough to change anyone's life. When detectives shared this information, the direction of the investigation shifted. Until now, Marcus had been seen as a victim. But suddenly, he looked like something else, a possible suspect. Questions filled the police station. Had Marcus staged the scene? Had he harmed his own family to escape financial ruin? Or was someone else behind the disappearance? Back at the chalet, forensic teams continued searching through the night. Then another clue appeared. Hidden near the fireplace, investigators discovered a broken picture frame lying beneath a rug. Inside it was a family photo, but the glass was cracked directly across Marcus's face. It might have been an accident, or it might have meant something more. Outside, snow continued to fall silently over Rosenfeld, covering roads, covering trees, and perhaps, covering the truth. As the second day ended without answers, fear spread through the town. Parents locked their doors earlier than usual. Children were told not to walk alone. The once peaceful town no longer felt safe. And somewhere in the darkness, whether hidden in the forest, beneath the frozen lake, or far beyond the town, the Schauer family remained missing, vanished without a trace. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of the Schauer family only grew darker. Rosenfeld, once a peaceful mountain town, now felt heavy with fear. People spoke in whispers at grocery stores and cafes. Children were no longer allowed to play outside alone. Every unfamiliar car passing through town made residents nervous. Search teams continued combing the forests surrounding the Schauer chalet. Police officers, volunteers, and rescue dogs walked through thick snow, calling out the family's names again and again. But there were no answers, only silence. Then, nearly 3 weeks after the disappearance, everything changed. It happened on a cold gray afternoon. Snow clouds hung low over the mountains, and freezing winds swept across the forest. A team of search dogs suddenly became restless near an old hiking trail that had not been used much during winter. The dogs barked loudly and scratched at a patch of snow near a group of tall pine trees. At first, officers thought it might be an animal, but as they cleared away the snow, something strange appeared. A piece of fabric. Blue fabric. It looked like part of a blanket. The officers quickly called for backup. Carefully, they dug deeper into the frozen ground. What they uncovered made everyone step back in horror. A shallow grave. Inside were two bodies. The moment investigators confirmed their identities, the news spread across Switzerland within hours. The bodies belonged to Alina Schauer and Sophie Schauer. The discovery shocked the entire nation. At the forensic center, medical examiners worked through the night to understand what had happened. Their findings revealed heartbreaking details. Alina had injuries on her hands and arms, showing clear signs of struggle. She had fought hard, trying to protect herself, or possibly her children. Sophie's body told a different, more emotional story. She had been wrapped tightly in a blanket. The same blue blanket found in the grave. It looked as though someone had covered her carefully, almost gently. That detail confused investigators. If the killer had shown cruelty, why show care afterward? Was it guilt? Or something else entirely? But the biggest mystery remained. Luca and Marcus were still missing. With Alina and Sophie confirmed dead, many investigators believed Marcus had killed them and fled with Luca. It seemed like the simplest explanation. Financial troubles, insurance policies, family conflict. All signs pointed to Marcus. But as detectives continued digging into his life, they uncovered secrets that complicated the story even further. Inside Marcus's downtown office, investigators carefully searched through cabinets, drawers, and computer files. Most of the documents were related to his architecture business. Blueprints, contracts, invoices. Everything seemed normal. Until one detective noticed something unusual. A locked drawer at the bottom of Marcus's desk. It required special tools to open. When the drawer finally slid open, the contents inside stunned everyone. Dozens of letters lay stacked neatly together. Each envelope was marked with the same symbol, a black triangle drawn in thick ink. The detectives carefully read the letters. Their contents were disturbing. They were threats. Short, cold messages demanding large amounts of money. The words were simple but terrifying. Pay what you owe. You were warned. Next time, your family pays. None of the letters contained names. Only the black triangle symbol. Investigators immediately realized Marcus had been under pressure long before the disappearance. But from whom? And why? The next discovery made the situation even more dangerous. One of Marcus's business partners, a man named Daniel Vogt, came forward after hearing about the threatening letters. He requested a private meeting with police. During questioning, Daniel appeared nervous. His hands trembled as he spoke. He revealed that Marcus had been working on a secret construction project for unknown investors. Luxury homes, large properties built far outside Rosenfeld. The payments had been unusually high, far above normal rates. At first, Marcus believed he had simply found wealthy clients. But months later things changed. Daniel explained that Marcus had recently grown fearful, very fearful. He began receiving strange phone calls at night. Sometimes he would leave his office suddenly without explanation. Other times, he refused to discuss certain projects even with close partners. Then, only weeks before the disappearance, Marcus told Daniel something chilling. I made a mistake, Marcus had whispered. They're not who they say they are. Daniel said Marcus believed the investors were criminals, possibly using the buildings to hide illegal money. Money laundering. When Marcus tried to cancel the project, the threats began. The black triangle letters, the warning messages, the fear. Suddenly, investigators saw the case from a new angle. Maybe Marcus was not the villain. Maybe he was trapped. Maybe the Schauer family had been targeted because Marcus tried to walk away from something dangerous. As police reviewed Marcus's financial records again, they noticed another strange detail. Large deposits had appeared in his accounts, then disappeared just as quickly. money moving in and out rapidly, almost like someone controlling his finances. That discovery changed the direction of the investigation completely. The Schauer family case was no longer just about family conflict or insurance money. It now pointed toward organized crime. Dangerous people, powerful people. Back in Rosenfeld, fear grew stronger with each passing day. Residents locked doors earlier than ever before. Some families even considered leaving town. Meanwhile, investigators faced a painful truth. 2 family members were dead. 2 were still missing. And somewhere, hidden beneath layers of snow and secrets, lay the truth that could expose a much larger crime than anyone had imagined. The Schauer case was no longer just a tragedy. It was becoming a national mystery. One that threatened to reveal secrets far darker than anyone was prepared to face. Nearly 2 months had passed since the Schauer family vanished. Winter still covered Rosenfeld in thick snow, but the town no longer felt peaceful. The once cheerful streets now carried a quiet heaviness. People spoke softly when mentioning the Schauer name. Some avoided the topic completely. The discovery of Alina and Sophie had already shaken the nation. News channels across Switzerland discussed the case daily. Investigators worked around the clock, but answers remained painfully out of reach. Then, on a freezing morning in late March, something unexpected happened. A farmer named Herr Meyer, who lived several kilometers outside Rosenfeld, woke before sunrise as he always did. His daily routine rarely changed. He checked his livestock, walked along the frozen edge of his land, and inspected nearby cabins used during the summer hiking season. That morning, as he looked toward the forest, something unusual caught his eye. A thin line of smoke. At first, he thought it might be steam from melting snow. But as he stared longer, the smoke grew thicker. It was rising from an abandoned cabin deep in the woods, a place rarely visited during winter. Herr Meyer felt uneasy. No one should have been there. Without wasting time, he returned to his farmhouse and called the police. Within minutes, officers were on their way. The drive to the cabin was slow and difficult. Snow covered the narrow trail, forcing officers to continue on foot. Their boots sank into deep snow as they moved cautiously toward the small wooden structure. Smoke continued rising from the chimney. Someone was inside. One officer raised his hand, signaling silence. They approached the door carefully, listening for movement. Nothing, just the faint crackling of firewood. The officer pushed the door open. What they saw inside shocked them. Near the corner of the room, wrapped in layers of blankets, sat a small figure curled beside a weak fire. At first, it was hard to recognize him. His face was pale, his lips were dry and cracked, his clothes were dirty and torn, but then he slowly looked up. It was Luca Schauer, alive. The officers rushed toward him immediately. "Luca, it's okay," one officer said gently. The boy didn't answer. He stared at them with wide, frightened eyes. Eyes filled with exhaustion and fear. His hands trembled as he tried to pull the blanket tighter around himself. He looked smaller than anyone remembered. Much smaller. Paramedics arrived quickly and carried Luca to an ambulance. His body temperature was dangerously low. He had signs of dehydration and frostbite on his fingers. Doctors later said he had survived on melted snow and small food supplies left in the cabin, likely stored there during summer months. It was a miracle he had lasted so long. News of Luca's survival spread rapidly across Switzerland. People who had already lost hope now felt a small spark of relief. But relief quickly turned into questions. What had Luca seen? What had happened inside the Schauer chalet that night? At the hospital, doctors kept Luca under close observation. For the first few days, he refused to speak. He barely moved. Every loud noise made him flinch. Every unfamiliar face made him turn away. But one strange detail caught everyone's attention. Luca kept repeating the same words in a soft whisper. "Is he gone?" Over and over again. "Is he gone?" No one knew who he meant. Doctors brought in child psychologists to help him feel safe. They spoke gently, giving him time to recover. Days passed before Luca finally spoke clearly. When he did, Investigators listened carefully. What he revealed changed the case forever. Luca described that of February 14th in slow, trembling words. He said he had been asleep in his room when loud voices woke him. At first, he thought his parents were arguing again, something that had happened before. But this time felt different. The voices were deeper, stranger. He stepped quietly into the hallway and looked down toward the living room. That was when he saw them. 3 men. They were wearing dark clothing and heavy boots. Their faces were partly hidden by shadows. They were arguing with his father. Luca remembered hearing certain words clearly. Money, deadline, betrayal. His father sounded angry, but also afraid. Then everything happened quickly. Luca described hearing a loud crash, glass breaking. His mother screamed. His sister began crying loudly. One of the men shouted something he didn't understand. Then his father looked up and saw him standing in the hallway. Their eyes met. Luca said that moment stayed in his mind like a frozen picture. Marcus ran toward him immediately. Run! Marcus whispered urgently. Go to the forest cabin. His voice was desperate. Stay hidden. Don't come back. Luca said. His father grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the back door. The cold air rushed inside as the door opened. Behind them, chaos continued, shouting, crying, heavy footsteps. Before Luca stepped outside, his father whispered one last thing. Stay alive. Those were the final words Luca ever heard from Marcus. Luca ran into the dark forest alone. Snow fell heavily that night, making it hard to see. He stumbled through deep drifts, guided only by memory, remembering the path to the summer cabin his family once used for hiking trips. He reached the cabin after what felt like hours, and he stayed there, alone, waiting, hoping his father would return. But Marcus never did. When Luca finished telling his story, silence filled the hospital room. Investigators realized something important. Marcus had not been running away. He had been trying to save his son. And the 3 unknown men were now the center of the investigation. The Schauer case was no longer just about missing persons or financial troubles. It had become something much bigger, something far more dangerous. And somewhere, hidden beyond the snowy mountains, the men responsible were still out there, believing their secrets remained buried beneath the snow. After Luca shared his story, the investigation moved faster than ever before. For weeks, detectives followed small clues that led nowhere. But now, with Luca's description of the 3 men and Marcus's secret business dealings, the case finally began to take shape. The focus shifted toward Marcus Schauer's mysterious construction projects. Investigators studied every contract, payment, and blueprint connected to his company. Teams of financial experts joined the case, tracing money transfers across banks in Switzerland and beyond. What they uncovered shocked even the most experienced officers. Large sums of money had moved through Marcus's accounts. Millions of Swiss francs appearing suddenly, then disappearing just as quickly. At first, it seemed like normal business payments. But closer inspection revealed something darker. The buildings Marcus had designed were not ordinary homes. They were luxury properties built in isolated areas, far from public roads, and often registered under fake company names. Police suspected these properties were being used to hide illegal money laundering. The deeper investigators searched, the clearer the picture became. Marcus had unknowingly worked for a powerful criminal group that used construction projects to clean illegal funds. At first, he believed they were simply wealthy investors. But when he began noticing strange requests, hidden rooms, false walls, secret storage areas, he realized something was wrong, and by then, it was too late. Phone records showed Marcus had tried to cancel the contracts weeks before his family disappeared. Emails recovered from his computer revealed urgent messages where he demanded to end the agreement. One message stood out above the rest. I will not continue. This ends now. That message was sent just 5 days before February 14th. Investigators believed that decision sealed his fate. The black triangle symbol found on the threatening letters, became a critical clue. Authorities shared the symbol with national crime agencies, hoping someone would recognize it. Soon, they received a match. The symbol belonged to a secret criminal network known for operating across several European countries. The group specialized in financial crimes, property fraud, and intimidation. They were dangerous and extremely careful. Tracking them would not be easy. Meanwhile, search teams returned to the frozen lake near the Schauer chalet. The same place where Elena's red scarf had been discovered weeks earlier. Using new information from Luca's testimony, divers searched deeper areas beneath the ice. Then, one cold morning, they made a heartbreaking discovery. Buried beneath layers of frozen water and mud, they found a body. It was Marcus Schauer. The news devastated the nation. For weeks, many had believed Marcus was responsible for his family's deaths. Now the truth was becoming clear. He had been a victim too. The forensic report confirmed that Marcus had died the same night Elena and Sophie were killed. He had injuries consistent with a violent struggle. Investigators believed he fought the attackers, giving Luca time to escape into the forest. In his final moments, Marcus had done everything he could to protect his son. That revelation changed how the public saw him. He was no longer viewed as a suspect. He was remembered as a father who sacrificed himself. With stronger evidence now in hand, police launched a massive operation to capture the men responsible. Months of surveillance followed. Phone signals were traced. Bank accounts were monitored. Hidden properties connected to the criminal network were investigated. Finally, nearly 6 months after the tragedy, officers arrested 3 suspects during coordinated raids in different cities. Each man matched Luca's description. Each had ties to Marcus's construction projects, and each denied involvement. But the evidence against them was overwhelming. Financial records linked them to the black triangle symbol. Witnesses confirmed their presence near Rosenfeld on the night of February 14th. DNA evidence recovered from the Schauer home placed them inside the chalet. The case moved to trial. For nearly a year, the courtroom remained filled with reporters, investigators, and grieving citizens who followed every detail closely. Luca, though still young, gave a brief testimony from behind protective screens. His voice shook, but his words remained clear. "I saw them," he said softly. "They hurt my family." Those simple words left many in tears. After months of hearings, expert reports, and witness statements, the final day arrived. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. All 3 men were found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and organized crime activities. They were sentenced to life in prison. Justice had finally been served. But justice could not erase the pain. Weeks later, the town of Rosenfeld held a memorial service for the Schauer family. Snow fell gently as hundreds of people gathered near the lake. Some traveled from distant cities just to pay their respects. Others brought flowers, candles, and photographs. The entire town stood together in silence. Luca, now living with his grandparents, stood at the front of the gathering. In his arms, he held Sophie's stuffed rabbit, Milo, the same toy found in her bedroom weeks before. He looked older than his years. Stronger, but deeply marked by loss. One by one candles were lit. Their reflections shimmered across the frozen lake. The same lake that had hidden painful secrets beneath its icy surface. As the wind carried soft whispers across the crowd, many people began to cry. Not quietly, but openly. Newspapers across Switzerland reported the same powerful headline the next morning. All of Switzerland wept. The Schauer family case became one of the most heartbreaking tragedies the nation had ever known. A story of hidden danger, betrayal, and sacrifice. Even today, years later, the Schauer chalet stands at the edge of the forest. Empty, silent, its windows dark. Some locals claim they still feel an uneasy chill when passing by at night. Others say the wind through the trees sounds like distant whispers. A reminder that behind the image of a perfect family, unseen dangers were waiting. And that one father's final act of courage saved the only life that remained. the life of his son.